What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of ADHD Success Stories by ADHD-doers. After talking about two airline moguls, Richard Branson and David Neilman, in this episode we're going to talk about a different story. A story of a legend who left a legacy, but only after he died. We're going to talk about his struggles with ADHD, why we suspect he has ADHD, and how you can avoid falling into the traps he fell into. So you make sure you showcase your genius to the world and learn from the past. This way you don't have to make the same mistakes in the future. So without further ado, let's get right into it. By the way, just as a little side note before we start, I actually have COVID right now and my voice is a little bit weird, but we have to stick to the schedule, so bear with me. You might know him as the painter of Mona Lisa, Version of the Rocks, or even The Last Supper, one of the most famous paintings in the world, ever. His talents and curiosities drove him to many other things, among them anatomy and physiology, engineering, and inventing. He was possibly the most innovative of his time, famous for creating some of the most lifelike representations of the human body. He's the man who drew the Vitruvian Man. His 6,000 plus journal pages filled with ingenious writings, of which many experts have attempted to make sense of by studying and translating. The man is a genius, but was there more behind his genius? We might all know of his masterpieces, but here are some fun facts about them that you may not know yet. Fun fact number 1, the famous Mona Lisa was an unfinished project. Da Vinci had worked on it sporadically, on and off, across 16 years. He even continued tweaking it until his death, and he never actually finished the masterpiece. Fun fact number 2, the Adoration of the Magi, which is suspected to be a self-portrait, by the way, was also unfinished. This was actually a commissioned job. After it was abandoned by Da Vinci, it was reassigned to another painter, Filippino Lippi. Fun fact number 3, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne. An oil painting depicting the Virgin Mary, an infant Jesus, and Mary's mother was yet another unfinished painting. This one was commissioned for a church in Florence, likely by King Louis XII of France, but of course it was never delivered. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely starting to sense a theme here.
Wait a minute!
He actually had a bad reputation. Yep, that's right, Da Vinci was pretty bad at completing his projects. I know. Yikes. And the worst part, he was known for it. In fact, his genius wasn't acknowledged until long after his death. During his lifetime, he was notorious for starting and abandoning projects. At age 26, he was assigned his first commissioned painting, but it was never delivered, despite being given a cash advance for it. Whereas by the same age, Raphael had already completed more than 80 paintings. He was great at captivating patrons with ambitious ideas, but failed to follow through with them. He was also not great at delivering work on time, if he delivered them at all. Though clearly talented, his impulsiveness and inability to commit left his clients with a bad taste. His patrons, the dukes, the kings, and the popes knew him as someone who was highly unreliable in finishing commissioned projects. Often, other artists were hired to work on paintings that were first commissioned to him. Despite signing contracts obliging him to finish work on time, his projects were often not finished nor submitted. He was kind of a pain to work with in this sense. So much that his patrons became more and more unforgiving throughout his career. And word got around, which meant that less and less people trusted him enough to pay him for his work. Life as an artist was pretty rough for Leonardo da Vinci, the unreliable, unemployable painter. But why did he struggle with completing his tasks? He was sort of erratic in his ways. He would move rapidly from task to task. His pace and patterns were unpredictable. He was unorganized, unmanaged, and so on. Matteo Bandello, a novelist who observed Leo working on The Last Supper, comments the following on the way that he worked. He said that he would take up his brush and give up one or two touches to one of the figures and suddenly give up and go away again. There wasn't a consistent rhythm to his working style, it was fickle and chaotic. To Da Vinci, working on his own was a huge challenge. He was quite unsuccessful in being a solo painter. It was known that many of his projects were completed with the help of an assistant or done in collaboration with other great painters. He regularly got in his own way. He was practically the only thing keeping himself from completing his paintings. It seemed that unfortunately throughout his life, Leonardo never figured out a way to work that worked for him, and it hindered him. Now, let's take a look at all the ways his inability to manage his impulsivities affected his career. He abandoned a lot of projects, even commissioned ones. Much of his work was left unfinished. He had difficulty paying attention, organizing tasks, and completing them. He would rarely turn in his assignments. Some of his projects were reassigned to other artists. He could not focus on one thing. This led him to switch between one profession to another, never fully committing to a single one. From polymath, painter to sculptor. He was easily distracted, he forgot things often, he was all over the place. He was a failure in many ways, to the point that his clients would stop working with him. His career started on the wrong foot. Unfinished projects for disappointed clients, and ended with him trying but failing to finish Mona Lisa. Perhaps it was never his intention to ever finish his masterpieces. Perhaps he had planned to continue to refine them to his last day. Regardless, clients would set deadlines that he could not manage to meet. All of these flaws sound horrible, right? And yet, he was undeniably a legend of his time.
How?
So what made him so great? Well, perhaps the most disruptive side of his mind was his insatiable curiosity. His curiosity distracted him from completing his tasks, but at the same time it was also what boosted his creativity. One great example, the Vitruvian Man, the blend of mathematics and art, only existed due to his interest in both mathematics and art. The drawing demonstrates Leonardo's deep understanding of proportion, which is quite revolutionary back then. Curiosity drove him to learn so many things in his lifetime, way more than the average person in his days.
Whoa. Whoa.
But it didn't always serve him. He was innately explorative. He was curious about almost everything. Everything that surrounded him intrigued him. He compulsively took notes and drew to try to make sense of it all. He considered nearly every natural phenomenon worthy of study and studied them. He would attempt all of the things that excited him. It's no wonder he completed so few things. When curiosity is unmanaged and unbounded, you would rarely see things to their end. In a way, curiosity was Leonardo da Vinci's superpower and his kryptonite. But did he care about all of this? I don't think so. I think he was fine living life this way. I even think he enjoyed following his curiosities. So the question now is, knowing all of this about him, the good, the bad, and the ugly, what do we believe was his true legacy? Leonardo da Vinci, a Renaissance artist of many legacies, paintings, sketches, notes, innovations, and inventions, showed us more than just his masterpieces. His true legacy was him showing us, one, that despite obvious trouble organizing and completing tasks, he was able to produce exceptional work. Two, that even though he wasn't known as the most reliable painter of his time, his paintings proved to be extremely high value. Three, that he was able to make a mark in history with the ways that he approached his art exploratively at his own pace and his own way. And four, that the only way to keep producing great work is to keep trying, which is what he did till the very end of his life. Five, that working with others is important for ADHDers. And 6, all of this helped us make a video about him that we can show you to prove to you that despite having ADHD, you can still be one of the greats. Maybe a few people watching this video will be inspired to the point where the legend living within them will finally wake up, and maybe he'll find the cure to cancer. Who knows?
Give me a roar. That's the fucking roar! That's the fucking roar! Fuck yes, brother!
King's College London professor Marco Catani is in agreement with this. He calls Leonardo a genius driven to destruction. In an article he wrote about Leonardo, he concludes in this way: "It is incredible that Leonardo considered himself as someone who had failed in life. I hope that the case of Leonardo shows that ADHD is not linked to low IQ or lack of creativity, but rather the difficulty of capitalizing on natural talents on their own. I hope that Leonardo's legacy can help us to change some of the stigma around ADHD. ADHD is stigmatized. People who have ADHD grow up experiencing a lot of shame, maybe even as much shame as Leonardo did, or even more. I'm sure that if DaVinci was alive today, he'd be happy to know that people are learning ways to manage ADHD, to maximize the advantages and minimize the damage. I'm sure that's what he would have wanted for himself, too. As talented as he was, unfortunately some of his talents had to go to waste due to his inability to manage his ADHD. So how do you make sure your natural talents don't go to waste? Lucky for you, you don't live in the 1500s, where information and support for ADHD was non-existent. It would have been impossible to get guidance on how to utilize the advantages of having ADHD to use it as a superpower, while learning strategies to manage the negative sides and minimize the damage. If you've watched this far, you're probably a creative person with lots of great ideas. You probably feel like you've got so much untapped potential. Your ADHD keeps getting in the way, and you're in desperate need of a strategy to help you deal with the chaos you can't escape. You might feel misunderstood. You might strive to do better, but just can't seem to sort things out. And what's the point of living your life being misunderstood? That's why we're giving you our ebook, The Blacklist, for free. It tells you the 17 negative thought patterns and behaviors people with ADHD tend to get caught in. Most of you are surely making some or all these mistakes over and over. This is the intervention that will help anyone who feels stranded and stuck to dig their goals and dreams out of their graves. These are things we've noticed from running ADHD-oers and being around ADHDers for 2 years. If you consider yourself ambitious, I urge you not to waste this opportunity to learn about yourself and how your brain works, because it will help you out of the rut you're in. It'll get you unstuck. So yeah, click the link below and have fun. Watch the other videos we've made. We've made a video about David Neilman, an entrepreneur in the aviation world, and we've talked about how ADHD helped him become a multi-millionaire and how he used his powers to become a super successful entrepreneur. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode.